On the live stream Saturday night, someone suggested that the trial of Brian Walsh was set for this week. That's not quite accurate. The jury selection is set for this week, but the trial is not going to begin until December. But today, for subscribers who, like me, were not familiar with Brian Walsh, let's delve into his backstory so we can be prepared to evaluate his trial fully armed with the facts. Here's what we're talking about today. Brian Walsh is a convicted federal fraudster who took a friend's Andy Warhol paintings, sold fakes on eBay for tens of thousands of dollars, and then, years later, was charged with murdering his wife, Ana. Authorities believe she was killed on New Year's Day, 2023. Prosecutors say he searched the internet for 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. He bought cleaning supplies and dumped bloody evidence into trash containers around Boston. He has pleaded not guilty. The charges are only allegations at this point, and at the time I'm recording this, obviously, a jury has not returned a verdict because it doesn't start till next week. In this video, I'm going to walk you through Brian Walsh's backstory, his art fraud conviction, the inheritance disputes, and how all of that connects to the murder case that's headed for trial. This case has not received nearly enough attention in the national media. Who are Brian and Ana Walshe? Ana Walshe was a 39-year-old Serbian-American real estate executive. She divided her time between the family home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, and her job in Washington, D.C., where she worked in a high-end commercial real estate organization. She had built a portfolio reportedly worth in the neighborhood of $3 million there. Her husband, Brian Walsh, lived at the Cohasset home with Ana and their 3 young children. He was not just a stay-at-home father. By the time Ana disappeared, he was also a convicted felon. Federal prosecutors had established he defrauded a buyer out of $80,000. At the time of the disappearance, he was awaiting sentencing for this art fraud scheme. On January 4, 2023, Ana's employer in D.C. reported her missing when she didn't show up for work. Brian later called police himself, but that was after the company's report. What started as a missing person investigation in a quiet coastal town very quickly blossomed into a full-fledged suspected homicide investigation. The Warhol art fraud scheme. Long before Ana vanished, federal prosecutors already had Brian Walsh in their sights. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts, the story starts years earlier with a pair of Andy Warhol's shadow paintings. A friend had entrusted those works to Walsh. Prosecutors say he took the original paintings, then offered them for sale on eBay as genuine Warhols. A buyer wired him tens of thousands of dollars, roughly $80,000, for what he believed were authentic Warhols. When the buyer received the paintings and had them inspected, though, experts concluded they were fakes. Federal agents investigated, and eventually they charged Walsh with wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, possession of converted goods, and unlawful monetary transaction. He was indicted in 2018, and 3 years later, in 2021, he pleaded guilty. And again, there's no explanation of this gap in time here, but in February of 2024, so after Ana went missing, a federal judge sentenced him to 37 months in prison, 3 years of supervised release, and ordered over $475,000 in restitution for the fraud scheme. So when Ana disappeared in January of 2023, Walsh was already living under the shadow of a serious federal conviction and a very real possibility of additional prison time if he violated his release conditions or failed to pay that restitution. Family and inheritance disputes. Brian's background issues don't stop with art fraud. Court records in Massachusetts describe a long-running dispute involving his late father's estate. According to reporting on that case, Brian's relationship with his father had deteriorated badly years before his father's death. In a will, the father allegedly left Brian only his best wishes, but nothing else. Relatives accused Brian of destroying that will after his father died and attempting to take control of an estate they valued at roughly $500,000, leading to probate court litigation over alleged probate fraud. Some of those relatives and family friends described him in court filings and interviews as manipulative and untrustworthy. That probate case was eventually dismissed, but it added another layer to the picture prosecutors now paint: a man under financial pressure, a man with a history of fraud, a man with very strained family relationships, or more accurately, and summing up, I guess, a ticking time bomb. The disappearance of Ana Walshe. Now let's walk through the timeline of Ana's disappearance because this is the core of the state's murder case. According to prosecutors and court filings, Ana was last seen in the early hours of January 1st, 2023 at the couple's home in Cohasset after a small New Year's Eve gathering. Brian later told police that Ana had left early that next day, New Year's Day, for a work emergency in Washington, D.C., that she had summoned a ride to Logan Airport and flown out. But investigators couldn't find records to confirm that flight. On January 4, Ana's employer in D.C. reported her missing when she didn't show up for work. Only after that did Brian report her missing as well. When investigators started checking Brian's story, they found problems. They say surveillance video didn't support his claimed errands to CVS and Whole Foods that he said he did on January 1st. So they obtained a search warrant for the home, and in the basement, police reported finding blood and a damaged, bloody knife. Now, let me just step away for a second and say, how stupid is that? You commit this crime and you search about how to, avoid conviction by doing all these things, and you leave blood and a fiber and a knife down in your basement to get you caught up. If you did something that awful, it certainly seems prudent to make sure that you would clean and dispose of your tools in the same way, but he didn't do that. It's a good thing that criminals are usually stupid. It's especially good in this case because this case involves Trooper Michael Proctor as well as Trooper Buchanan. Police then began tracking Brian's movements in the days after Ana supposedly left for D.C. And you have to remember, they have a phone so they can follow his GPS trail to all the places that he went and all the places that he came back to. While he was on his little mission, he spent $450 at Home Depot in Rockland buying supplies, cleaning supplies, tools, items like mops, buckets, tarps, and a hatchet and similar cutting tools. As the investigation widened, police searched trash transfer stations and reportedly recovered a hacksaw, cutting shears, bags of trash containing clothing, and other items stained with blood and bearing Ana's DNA. Most chilling, prosecutors say they pulled Brian's Google search history from his son's iPad and other devices. On January 1st, and in the days following Ana's disappearance, they allege that Brian searched for how long before a body starts to smell, 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to, as opposed to if you didn't need to. It's a strange way to phrase a search request. Dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body, how to clean blood from a wooden floor, can you be charged with murder without a body, and many others related to decomposition, DNA, and disposing of remains. And I'd point out again that Ana's body has never been found. On January 8, 2023, Brian Walsh was arrested and charged with misleading police in the investigation. On January 18, he was charged with murder and improper conveyance of a human body. A Norfolk County grand jury later indicted him on first-degree murder, misleading a police investigation, and improper conveyance of a human body. He entered pleas of not guilty to all of those charges, and of course, under our law, he is presumed innocent until he is proven guilty. motive theories, and connections to the fraud case. So, how does the art fraud connect to the alleged murder? Well, prosecutors have suggested several possible motives. Reporting from multiple outlets indicates they'll argue that Brian faced federal prison time and a massive restitution bill for the Warhol fraud case. He may have sought money from Ana for the restitution. He may have believed that if Ana disappeared, it could somehow help him avoid or soften that federal sentence because they had children. And he also stood to benefit from roughly $2.7 million in life insurance policies in Ana's name, listing him as the beneficiary. There are also reports that Ana had taken concrete steps toward leaving the marriage, including discussions of moving assets and concerns she voiced to others about Brian's behavior. Some accounts mention that she once told D.C. police that Brian had threatened to kill her, though those details will be tested in court like everything else. Again, none of this has yet been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. These are only allegations, these are only the prosecutor's theories, and that's just what we expect them to present at trial when it begins. Recent developments, the jail attack and the competency ruling. Since the indictment, the case has continued to evolve in strange and interesting ways. In September of 2025, Brian Walsh was reportedly attacked in jail with a makeshift weapon. No evidence really about what the cause of that attack was. Maybe he just doesn't have a nice personality. That assault led his defense team to request a mental health evaluation, arguing that physical and psychological trauma from the attack affected his ability to assist in his defense. Judge Diane Frenier, who now presides over the case, ordered him sent to Bridgewater State Hospital for a full competency evaluation. After that evaluation, the court ruled that Walsh is competent to stand trial, and the court also denied a change of venue motion that had been filed by the defense. The court has set jury selection to begin this week in November, with opening statements expected the first week of December, though the exact dates can always shift slightly as the court calendar changes. What to watch for at trial. So when this case finally goes to trial, what should you watch for? First, the digital trail. Those Google breadcrumbs, those searches, the cell phone and the breadcrumbs that the cell phone drops on all the trips around town that Brian would have made, and the iPad search data. In addition to that, you can look for surveillance footage from Brian's movements around the time Ana vanished. The state's going to call digital forensics experts to testify about how the phones and iPads were downloaded and what was found. Second, the forensic evidence. Forensic people are going to come in because there's blood in the home, there's blood on the knife, there's blood on the hacksaw, and they're also going to talk about the DNA recovered from trash facilities and also that recovered near his mother's home, Brian's mother's home. Problem for the state here may well be showing a connection to Brian Walsh if the bags were found somewhere other than in his possession. If there isn't his DNA on the bags or his fingerprints on the bags, it will be difficult to show that he placed those bags there, and hence the prosecution would lose those very valuable pieces of evidence. Third, the financial and prior bad acts evidence. The federal art fraud conviction, the inheritance disputes, the alleged life insurance motive, the judge is going to have to decide how much of that is going to go before the jury and for what limited purposes. Because if you limit the purpose to a specific purpose, then they can't consider it for other purposes, like guilt. Normally, prior bad acts evidence goes to establish motive, intent, absence of mistake, common scheme or plan. Those are the uses of that kind of evidence. Now here, motive and intent would certainly be relevant. I don't think anybody is alleging that there's an accident involved, and so that would be able to get it in for those purposes. And certainly the federal art fraud conviction and the insurance motive would go to motive and intent. And then finally, there's the all-important jury instructions. This is expected to be a no-body homicide case. The judge will instruct the jury on how they can or may not, if they wish, draw inferences from circumstantial evidence when a body has never been recovered. Here on this channel, I'll be breaking down the major witness testimony, the legal rulings, and what the jury is likely to make of it. So tell me in the comments what questions you have about the Brian Walsh case. Again, we're going to assume that there will be cameras in the courtroom. Obviously, if they don't live stream this trial or the TV networks don't pick it up, it's going to be difficult for me to do a breakdown of the case. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here today. If you have the opportunity today, try to do one kind thing to help somebody else. Any kind thing will do. Buy somebody a Coke, get them a cup of coffee, anything that makes their day better. That would be a way to help make the world a better place. Because after all, isn't that what we're all after? Now, YouTube has a few things that they think you might be interested in, and they're going to be showing you that right up there.